Sir, we got a call about suspicious activity.
Suspicious for checking my own mailbox?
Do you have proof you live here?
Here's my lease, and I want your badge number.
Why do you need that?
Because I'm filing a complaint for racism.
They thought he was just another black man in the wrong place. People gave him strange looks and whispered behind his back. Then someone called the police. 5 minutes later, those same police officers stood there, embarrassed and apologizing, realizing they had just made a big mistake. Before we go on, I want to know where you're watching from. Type your city or country in the comments. I read every one of them. Let's see how far this story travels. Now, listen carefully, because what happened next is something you will not forget. It was a regular Wednesday morning. Malik had just finished his coffee. He wore black jeans, clean sneakers, and a white t-shirt. He stepped outside to check the mailbox in front of his apartment. He was quiet and did not speak to anyone. But across the street, a woman sitting in her car was watching him. Her engine was off, but her phone was in her hand. Malik started walking back toward his door when he noticed her window roll down. "Hey, do you live here?" she asked sharply. Malik looked at her, calm. "Yes," he said without emotion. "What apartment?" She asked again. Malik didn't answer. "Why are you asking me that?" he replied. The woman stared at him for a moment, then rolled up her window and started typing on her phone. 3 minutes later, a black and white police car pulled up in front of the building. Let me pause real quick. Does that sound familiar to any of you? Have you or someone you know ever been in a situation where just existing was seen as suspicious? If yes, drop "I've seen it" in the comments. You're not alone. Back to the story. 2 police officers got out of the car. One walked toward Malik while the other stayed near the woman's vehicle. "Sir, we got a call about suspicious activity," the officer said. Malik didn't move. "Suspicious how?" he asked. "We were told someone might be trespassing." Malik looked behind him at his door, just a few feet away. "This is my place," he said, pointing at it. "You got proof of that?" the cop asked. Malik didn't argue. He pulled his phone from his pocket, opened an app, and showed the officer his digital lease. It had his name, the apartment number, the rent details, everything. The officer paused and his face changed, but he didn't apologize. "Do you have ID?" he asked next. Malik handed over his license. While one officer looked it over, the other walked toward the neighbor's car. The woman rolled her window down again. "I've never seen him before," she said, and he looked suspicious. "What was he doing?" the officer asked. "He was checking the mailbox," she replied. That was it. That was all it took for her to call the cops, because he checked his own mailbox. The officer nodded and came back. "Sir," he said, "thanks for your cooperation. Looks like everything checks out." But here's where Malik flipped the script. He asked for the officer's badge number. "Excuse me?" the cop asked. "Your badge number and your name," Malik said firmly. The officer hesitated. "Why?" "Because I'm filing a complaint. I want this on record." This was a wrongful stop. The cop shifted. "Sir, we were just responding to a call." "And I'm responding to racism," Malik replied. "I want it documented." The other officer, who had been quiet the whole time, stepped forward. "I'm sorry, sir. You're right. You didn't do anything wrong. We'll note this in our report." Malik nodded. "I also want the name of the caller. I have a right to know who keeps harassing me." The woman now stepped out of her car. She looked nervous. "You're taking this too far," she said. "No, ma'am," Malik replied. "You already took it too far when you called the cops on a man for checking his own mail." She started to speak again, but one of the officers gently stopped her. "Ma'am, next time, please make sure before you call." Now the attention had flipped. People were watching. A man across the street had stepped onto his balcony. Someone down the road was recording with their phone. The woman got back in her car and drove off. The officers left not long after, both quieter than when they arrived. Malik stood there for a moment longer. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't shaken either. He had handled it with calm, with truth, and with the full understanding that even when you're right, you still have to fight to be seen. Later that evening, Malik sat by his window, the blinds halfway open. He wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of being questioned for existing. Tired of having to prove what should already be clear. Then came a knock on his door. He opened it slowly. It was her, the woman from the car. She wasn't bold anymore. Her face was softer now, unsure. She had both hands folded in front of her, like a child about to admit something wrong. "I wanted to apologize," she said quietly. "I didn't know you lived here." Malik looked at her. "You didn't ask," he replied. She nodded. "You're right. I saw you, and I made an assumption. I shouldn't have." There was a long pause. "I've lived here 2 months," Malik said. "Never caused trouble. Never had complaints." She looked down. "I know. I wasn't thinking straight." But Malik knew better. She had been thinking. She just hadn't thought with respect or fairness, or the idea that maybe, just maybe, a black man could belong where she did. "Next time," he said, "think differently. Because the next person you call the cops on might not be as calm as me." She nodded again. "I understand." And just like that, she left. No excuse, no fake smile. Just walked away. Now, pause with me for a second. If you were Malik, how would you have responded? Would you have accepted the apology? Would you have said more? Type, "I'd speak up" in the comments if you wouldn't have let it slide. I'm curious to know how y'all think. The next morning, Malik made the complaint official. He went to the local police station with printouts, his lease, the call log, even the video his neighbor had recorded. He sat down with a supervisor and told the story from start to finish. The officer behind the desk didn't interrupt. He just listened. At the end, he said, "We'll look into it." 3 days later, the department called Malik back. An internal review had opened a case. The officer who failed to de-escalate was being retrained. The other officer, the one who had apologized, wrote a full report admitting the stop was unnecessary. They were correcting it. But Malik wasn't doing it for revenge. He didn't want anyone to lose their job. He just wanted the system to stop assuming that black skin equals threat. That afternoon, he went back home. The street was quiet. Nobody watched him this time. No phone calls, no slow drive-bys. Just a man walking to his front door like everyone else. For the first time in weeks, he felt seen. He sat down again at his window, the same spot where he had thought about everything before. This time, the light outside felt softer. He took a deep breath and thought about how often this happened to people who looked like him. It wasn't just about him. It was about a world that judged before asking, feared before understanding, and called for help when there was no danger. He didn't hate the woman. He pitied her. Because fear had stolen her peace, not his. He had faced that fear, stayed calm, and shown what real strength looked like. Strength that doesn't come from shouting or fighting, but from standing firm in truth. Malik knew that he had done the right thing. He had spoken up not only for himself, but for everyone who had ever been questioned for simply existing. He wanted his story to be heard, not as a story of anger, but of awareness. The next week, the building management sent out a notice reminding all tenants to confirm before making police calls. It wasn't about him directly, but everyone knew what it referred to. People began greeting him more often now. Some smiled when they saw him by the mailbox. Others waved from their windows. The same space that once felt cold now felt a little warmer. He didn't want fame. He didn't need praise. All Malik wanted was to live in peace, to drink his coffee, check his mail, and enjoy his mornings without suspicion. And maybe, just maybe, someone watching the story would think twice before judging someone next time. Think differently, he had said. Those words stayed with him. They were not just for her, but for everyone. Because real change doesn't always come through protests or loud speeches. Sometimes it begins with one simple act, standing up with calm, with courage, and with the truth. Malik closed his blinds halfway and smiled a little. The world outside hadn't changed overnight, but something inside him had. He no longer felt invisible. He had spoken up, and that mattered. That night, as he prepared for bed, he replayed the moment when the officer had said, "Thanks for your cooperation." At that time, those words had felt empty. But now, they reminded him of something deeper. How staying calm in the face of disrespect could still expose injustice. He didn't tell anyone about the apology the woman gave him. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about what came after. About making sure that one person's mistake turned into a lesson for many. The next morning, he opened his blinds fully. The sun shone brighter. Across the street, a kid was riding his bike. A couple was walking their dog. The world had moved on, but Malik knew his story still mattered. He picked up his coffee cup, smiled faintly, and whispered, "I'm still here." And that was enough. For once, he didn't have to prove anything to anyone. He didn't need to defend himself. He was just Malik, a man at peace, a man who had been seen, a man who refused to be silent. He hoped his story would travel far, that people would share it and talk about it. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Because it could happen anywhere, to anyone. So, if you're listening now, take a moment. Think about what you've heard. Ask yourself what you would have done. Would you have stayed calm? Would you have spoken up? And maybe, the next time you see someone who doesn't look like you, before you assume, before you fear, before you call, just ask. Because sometimes, all it takes to stop another mistake is one simple question asked with kindness instead of judgment. And that small act can change everything.